My name is Brielle Matthews. I'm 28 years old, and 3 minutes ago I discovered something that shattered my world. I'm sitting in my kitchen, staring at an email that was accidentally forwarded to me. My hands are shaking as I read it again. Have you ever had that moment when everything you thought you knew about your life just crumbles? When the people you trusted most show their true colors in the cruelest way possible. My mother-in-law Constance just uninvited me from my own third wedding anniversary party. She doesn't know that I secretly own Rosewood Estate Vineyard, the $60 million property where she's planning this family celebration without me. The email is from the Vineyard's event coordinator. It says Mrs. Constance Whitmore has requested that the guest list be revised to exclude me because I'm not the right fit for such an elegant venue. She told them I wouldn't appreciate the sophisticated atmosphere anyway. I built my entire adult life trying to fit into Camden's world. I changed everything about myself. I learned their fancy table manners, wore their expensive clothes, spoke their polished language. And for what? But here's what Constance doesn't know about her unsuitable daughter-in-law. 2 years ago, I sold my tech company Valley Connect for $80 million. I've been hiding my success because Camden's family already hated me for being ordinary. Do you know someone who's been treated like they don't belong? Someone whose worth was questioned by people who knew nothing about their real story? The irony is so perfect it hurts. She's throwing me out of my own property. My phone buzzes. A text from Camden. Mom's planning something special at that vineyard for our anniversary. Hope you don't mind that it's family only this time. Family only. The words hit like a slap. I take a deep breath and dial Harrison, my vineyard manager. Time to let Constance know exactly who she's dealing with. But first, let me tell you how this whole mess started 3 years ago when I fell in love with a man who was ashamed of me from day one. 3 years ago, I was working 16-hour days at a tiny coffee shop near Stanford, saving every penny to keep my startup alive. That's where I met Camden Whitmore. He walked in wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent, but his smile was genuine and warm. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he said, ordering his third espresso that week. I laughed. Welcome to startup life. When you're trying to build something from nothing, sleep is optional. He started coming in every morning. We'd talk about dreams, about building something meaningful, about changing the world one small step at a time. He never mentioned his family's wealth. I had no idea his father owned half the tech companies in Silicon Valley. Have you ever met someone who made you believe in fairy tales again? Someone who looked at you like you were the most interesting person in the world? Camden proposed 6 months later in that same coffee shop. It was simple, beautiful, and perfect. I said yes without hesitation because I thought we were building something real together. The problem started the day I met his family. His mother, Constance, took one look at my department store dress and my nervous smile, and I watched her face shut down completely. She didn't say anything cruel that first day. She didn't need to. Her cold handshake and tight smile said everything. "So you work in food service," she said, making it sound like a disease. "I'm actually launching a tech company," I replied, trying to sound confident. She laughed. Not a mean laugh, but something worse, dismissive. Like I was a child playing dress-up. Camden squeezed my hand under the table. I thought he was supporting me. Now I realize he was already apologizing for me. His sister Maya pulled me aside later that evening. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "Mother has very specific ideas about who belongs in our world." But it felt personal when Constance forgot to invite me to Camden's birthday party. It felt personal when she planned their annual charity gala without including me on any planning calls. It felt personal when she told people at our engagement party that Camden was going through a phase. Do you know what it's like to love someone whose family treats you like you're temporary? Like you're just waiting around until their real life begins? I should have seen the warning signs. I should have noticed how Camden never defended me, just made excuses for his mother's behavior. Instead, I threw myself into trying to become the woman they wanted. I learned which fork to use for salad. I memorized wine regions and art history. I spent my savings on designer clothes and expensive jewelry. And the whole time, my little tech company was quietly growing into something extraordinary. But here's the thing about trying to become someone else. You lose pieces of yourself along the way. By our wedding day, I barely recognized the confident woman who used to dream about changing the world. Camden looked handsome in his tuxedo as we exchanged vows. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Relief. Like he was grateful I'd finally made myself acceptable enough to marry. What Camden's family never knew was that while they were busy judging my coffee-stained aprons and clearance rack clothes, I was building an empire. Valley Connect started as a simple idea, software that helps small businesses manage their customer relationships. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress tech billionaires. Just something useful for people like me who were trying to make it on their own. Every morning after Camden left for his corporate job, I'd work on my code. Every evening while he attended his family's social events without me, I'd take client calls and fix bugs. When Constance would make snide comments about my little hobby, I'd bite my tongue and keep building. Have you ever had a secret so big it changed everything about how you saw yourself? A truth that made all the insults and dismissals feel like cosmic jokes? By our second wedding anniversary, Valley Connect had 200 employees and contracts with major corporations across the country. We were profitable, growing fast, and getting acquisition offers every month. Camden knew I worked in tech, but he thought it was some small consulting gig. His family assumed I was barely making ends meet. They had no idea that I was probably worth more than most of them combined. The irony was delicious, but it was also lonely. I wanted to share my success with my husband, but I'd learned to hide my achievements. Every time I'd mentioned a business win in the past, Camden would get this uncomfortable look, like I was bragging or trying to compete with his family's success. So when Microsoft offered me $80 million for Valley Connect, I didn't tell anyone except my lawyer and accountant. The day the money hit my account, I sat in my car and cried. Not from joy, but from the crushing realization that I was rich beyond my wildest dreams, and I had no one to celebrate with. That's when I decided to buy Rosewood Estate Vineyard. I'd driven past it dozens of times on my way to client meetings. Rolling hills covered in perfect rows of grapevines, a stunning mansion that looked like something from a movie, gardens that took your breath away. It was for sale for $60 million, and I bought it without telling a soul. My plan was simple: surprise Camden for our third anniversary with the most romantic gesture I could imagine. I'd reveal that I owned this incredible property, and we'd have our celebration there surrounded by beauty and love. Do you know what it feels like to plan the perfect surprise for someone you love? To imagine their face lighting up when they realize what you've done for them? I worked with Harrison, the Vineyard manager, to plan everything in secret. We'd have dinner under the stars, I'd tell Camden about my success, and everything would finally make sense. He'd understand why I'd been working so hard, why I'd been so secretive. I thought it would be the beginning of our real life together. A life where I didn't have to hide who I was or what I'd accomplished. But 3 days ago, Constance called Camden with an idea. She wanted to throw us an anniversary party at that lovely vineyard she'd heard about. She'd handle all the arrangements, invite all the right people, make it a proper celebration. Camden was thrilled. He thought his mother was finally accepting me, finally including me in the family. I should have told him the truth then. I should have said, "Actually, I own that vineyard, and I was planning to surprise you there." Instead, I smiled and nodded and let Constance take over my own surprise. Because I thought she was finally trying to welcome me into the family. I thought maybe, after 3 years, I'd finally proven myself worthy of their acceptance. I was so naive it makes me sick. This morning, I called Harrison to check on the party arrangements. That's when he accidentally forwarded me Constance's real instructions. "I need this to be absolutely perfect," Constance had written to Harrison. "A sophisticated evening for sophisticated people. Please ensure the guest list reflects the caliber of event we're hosting." The email went on for 3 paragraphs about wine selections, floral arrangements, and catering preferences. Then came the paragraph that stopped my heart. "Regarding the guest list, I've made some necessary adjustments. Camden's wife won't be attending. She simply wouldn't appreciate an event of this caliber, and frankly, her presence would make our other guests uncomfortable. This is meant to be a celebration of family values and tradition. Have you ever had someone dismiss your entire existence in a single paragraph? Reduce you to an embarrassment that needs to be hidden away? But that wasn't even the worst part. Harrison had attached Constance's follow-up email from yesterday. I've told Camden that Brielle is dealing with a family emergency and suggested he attend alone. He was disappointed but understood. Sometimes we have to protect the people we love from situations they're not equipped to handle. She'd lied to my own husband, made him think I was choosing to miss our anniversary celebration. I scrolled through more emails, each one more infuriating than the last. Constance had invited her book club, Camden's college friends, extended family members I'd never met. 67 people total, all coming to celebrate my marriage at my own vineyard while I sat at home like a shameful secret. The guest list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley society. Tech executives, venture capitalists, old money families who'd been gatekeeping their social circles for generations. The exact people who'd spent 3 years treating me like I was invisible. Do you know what it's like to realize that the people you've been trying so hard to impress aren't worth impressing? That their approval was never going to matter because they'd already decided you didn't deserve it? I called Camden immediately, my hands shaking with rage. "Hey babe," he answered cheerfully. "I was just thinking about you. Mom's really outdone herself with this party planning." "I know about the party, Camden." Silence. Then, "What do you mean?" "I know I've been uninvited. I know your mother told you I had a family emergency, so you wouldn't question why your wife isn't at your anniversary party." More silence. I could practically hear him calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how he could spin it. "Brielle, it's not what you think." Mom was trying to be considerate. "She knows those kinds of events make you uncomfortable." Those kinds of events. Like I was some scared animal who couldn't handle civilized company. "What kinds of events, Camden?" "You mean events where your family actually has to acknowledge that I exist." "That's not fair. You know how important family tradition is to my mother." "And what am I? What have I been for 3 years, if not family?" He sighed, and in that sigh I heard everything I needed to know. Exhaustion. Like defending me was a burden he was tired of carrying. "Maybe it's better this way," he said finally. "You always say you feel out of place at these things. This takes the pressure off." The pressure off. Like being married to me was pressure he needed relief from. "So, you're okay with this? You're okay with celebrating our marriage without me there?" "It's one night, Brielle. And honestly, these are important people for my career. It might be easier if your embarrassing wife stays home." That's not what I meant, but it was exactly what he meant, and we both knew it. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, staring at the emails that had shattered my marriage in the span of 20 minutes. Camden texted me an hour later. "I'm sorry if I handled that wrong, but maybe we should talk about this after the party. Mom's put a lot of work into this." After the party. Like our marriage was something that could wait until his mother's social event was over. That's when I made the call that would change everything. "Harrison, it's Brielle Matthews, the Vineyard owner. I need to make some changes to Saturday's event." I could hear the confusion in his voice. We'd worked together for months, but he'd never connected me to the Whitmore anniversary party. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion. Saturday's event is being hosted by Mrs. Constance Whitmore for her son's anniversary. Her son Camden is my husband, and Mrs. Whitmore doesn't know that I own Rosewood Estate." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Oh my God," Harrison whispered. "The emails. She's been, oh no."
"Yes.
"She's been planning a party to celebrate my marriage at my own vineyard while specifically excluding me because I'm not good enough to attend." Have you ever watched someone realize they've been part of something cruel without knowing it? The horror in Harrison's voice was almost worth the humiliation I'd endured. "Mrs. Matthews, I am so sorry. If I had known the things she said about you, I never would have." "It's not your fault, Harrison. But I need you to understand something. Saturday night is going to happen exactly as planned. Every detail, every arrangement, every guest." "Of course. Should I tell Mrs. Whitmore that you'll be attending after all?" I smiled for the first time in days.
"No."
"Don't tell her anything. I'll handle the introductions myself." After I hung up, I sat in my living room and looked around at the life I'd built. Beautiful furniture that Constance had taught me to choose. Art that reflected her taste, not mine. Even my clothes had slowly transformed to meet her approval. I'd spent 3 years turning myself into someone else's idea of acceptable, and it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough because the problem was never me. The problem was them. Do you know what it feels like to finally stop apologizing for who you are? To realize that you've been playing a game where the rules were designed to make you lose? I walked to my closet and pulled out the dress I'd been planning to wear to our anniversary dinner, a simple black dress that made me feel confident and beautiful. Then I called my stylist. Rebecca, it's Brielle. I need a complete makeover for Saturday night. Something that says I own the place. Occasion. Revenge. She laughed. I love working with you. What's the venue? My $60 million vineyard. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for the most important performance of my life. I wasn't going to sneak in through the back door like a guilty secret. I wasn't going to apologize for existing or try to make anyone comfortable with my presence. I was going to walk into my own property like the queen I'd forgotten I was, and I was going to let every single person in that room know exactly who they'd been dismissing for 3 years. But first, I had to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be when this was all over. Did I want to humiliate them the way they'd humiliated me? Did I want to destroy Camden's family the way they'd tried to destroy my sense of self-worth? Or did I want to be better than that? As I sat there planning my entrance to Saturday's party, I realized I was about to find out exactly who Brielle Matthews really was when she stopped pretending to be someone else. Camden had no idea that his wife owned the vineyard where he'd be celebrating their marriage without her. Constance had no idea that the woman she'd deemed unsuitable was worth more than her entire social circle combined. And I had no idea how this night would end, but I knew one thing for certain. By Sunday morning, everyone would know the truth about who I really was. The question was, would there be anything left of my marriage to save? Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather and a text from Camden that made my blood boil. Heading to the vineyard early to help Mom set up. Thanks for being understanding about tonight. Love you. Understanding. Like I had graciously agreed to be excluded from my own anniversary party. I called Harrison at 8 a.m. sharp. How's the setup going? Mrs. Whitmore arrived an hour ago with a team of decorators. She's very particular about everything being perfect. Have you ever watched someone take credit for your own creation? Someone who has no idea they're rearranging furniture in your house. What's she saying about the arrangements? Harrison's voice dropped to a whisper. She keeps telling everyone how she discovered this hidden gem and convinced the owners to host their little party. She's acting like she personally knows the Vineyard family. The Vineyard family. That would be me. She also mentioned that she's planning to inquire about purchasing the property. Says it would make a lovely summer home for people of proper breeding. My hands clenched around the phone. Constance wanted to buy my vineyard because she thought I wasn't good enough to step foot on it. Harrison, I need you to do something for me. When I arrive tonight, don't announce me right away. Let me observe for a few minutes first. Of course. What time should I expect you? Right after Constance gives her opening speech about family values. I spent the day preparing like a warrior getting ready for battle. Rebecca worked magic with my hair and makeup. The dress we chose was stunning but not flashy, deep emerald green that brought out my eyes and cost more than most people's cars. Do you know what it feels like to look in the mirror and finally recognize yourself again? To see the confident woman you used to be before someone convinced you to hide? At 6 p.m., I drove toward my own vineyard with my heart pounding. The winding road was lined with expensive cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas. All the vehicles of people who thought they were better than me. I parked at the back entrance and walked through my own gardens toward the main terrace. String lights twinkled overhead, casting everything in a golden glow. The catering staff moved efficiently between tables set with my finest china and crystal. It was exactly the party I'd dreamed of hosting. Except I was sneaking around my own property, like a thief. Through the windows, I could see the guests mingling on the terrace. Camden looked handsome in his navy suit, laughing at something his uncle said. His sister Maya wore a silver dress that probably cost a fortune. And there was Constance, holding court in the center of it all, wearing cream silk and diamonds, accepting compliments like she was the hostess of her own estate. "The acoustics in this vineyard are just incredible," she was saying to a group of women. "When I toured the property last month, I knew immediately it was perfect for sophisticated entertaining." Last month. She'd never set foot on my property until this morning. Have you ever listened to someone lie so confidently that you almost believe them yourself? Someone who rewrites reality to make themselves the hero? I moved closer to the windows, staying in the shadows of my own garden. "Of course, not everyone appreciates this level of elegance," Constance continued, her voice carrying clearly through the evening air. "Camden's wife, bless her heart, would have been overwhelmed by an event like this. Sometimes kindness means protecting people from situations they're not equipped to handle." The women around her nodded sympathetically, like she was a saint for excluding me. "Marriage is about understanding your partner's limitations," she went on. "Camden deserves to celebrate with people who can truly appreciate what he's accomplished." My limitations. Like I was some damaged creature who needed to be managed and protected from the real world. I pulled out my phone and texted Harrison. "I'm here. Give me 5 more minutes, then make the announcement." As I watched Constance accept praise for her thoughtfulness in excluding me, I made my final decision about what kind of woman I wanted to be tonight. I was going to tell the truth. All of it. And let the consequences fall where they may. But first, I was going to let Constance finish digging her own grave. At 7:30, Constance clinked her champagne glass to get everyone's attention. The terrace fell silent as 67 people turned to face the woman who thought she was their hostess. Friends, family, thank you all for joining us at this magnificent vineyard to celebrate Camden and his wife's anniversary. His wife. She couldn't even say my name. Have you ever noticed how cruel people always sound so reasonable when they're explaining their cruelty? How they make exclusion sound like kindness? As many of you know, I've been planning this celebration for months. When I discovered Rosewood Estate, I knew immediately it was the perfect setting for tonight's gathering. She gestured grandly at the rolling hills and twinkling lights, taking credit for every beautiful detail. "This vineyard represents everything I value: tradition, elegance, and attention to quality. The owners clearly understand that some things are worth preserving, worth protecting from those who might not appreciate their true value." Several guests murmured agreement. I recognized most of them: Camden's college friends, Constance's charity committee, family members who'd spent 3 years looking through me like I was invisible. Tonight is about celebrating not just a marriage, but the importance of family standards. The importance of surrounding ourselves with people who understand what we've built and why it matters. Do you know what it sounds like when someone uses your own anniversary party to explain why you don't deserve to be there? When they turn your absence into a celebration of your unworthiness. Camden stood beside his mother, nodding along with every word. My husband, agreeing that his wife wasn't good enough for their family standards. I've often said that love isn't enough to sustain a marriage. You need shared values, shared understanding of what matters in life. You need. She paused dramatically, compatibility in all the ways that count. Maya looked uncomfortable, shifting in her silver dress. A few other guests exchanged glances. But most of them were eating it up, probably thinking about people in their own lives who didn't meet their standards. Camden has always been special. Brilliant, accomplished, destined for great things. He deserves a celebration worthy of his achievements, surrounded by people who can truly appreciate the life he's built. She raised her glass toward my husband, and every person on that terrace raised theirs in response. To Camden, who deserves nothing but the finest life has to offer. To Camden, the crowd echoed. I watched my husband accept that toast, accept the implication that he deserved better than me, accept his mother's public dismissal of his wife on their anniversary. That's when Harrison appeared at the main entrance, looking nervous, but determined. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, his voice carrying across the terrace. "I'd like to introduce someone very special." The crowd turned toward him with polite curiosity. Constance looked annoyed at the interruption of her perfect moment. May I present the owner of Rosewood Estate Vineyard, Mrs. Brielle Matthews. Have you ever seen 67 people's faces change at exactly the same moment? Have you ever watched a room full of confident people suddenly realize they have no idea what's happening? I stepped into the light wearing my emerald dress and the smile I'd been practicing all day. Not a mean smile, not a triumphant smirk, just the calm, confident smile of a woman who owned everything around her. The silence was so complete I could hear the wine glasses trembling in people's hands. Camden's face went white. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak underwater. Maya dropped her champagne flute. The crystal shattered against the stone terrace with a sound like breaking dreams. But Constance just stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Confusion, shock, and something that might have been fear. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. "Welcome to my home." The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. I heard fragments of conversation. Did she say her home? That's Camden's wife. How is this possible? Isn't she supposed to be? But I only had eyes for Constance, who was standing frozen in the center of my terrace, still holding her champagne glass like a weapon she'd forgotten how to use. "I believe you were just giving a toast," I said, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. Something about family standards and appreciating true value. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. 67 people stood frozen on my terrace, watching the most elegant woman they knew face off with the daughter-in-law she'd just publicly humiliated. Constance's face cycled through emotions: shock, confusion, embarrassment, and finally, a desperate attempt to regain control. "Brielle," she said, forcing a smile that looked like it was causing her physical pain. "What a surprise. I thought you were dealing with a family emergency." Have you ever watched someone try to rewrite reality in real time? Try to make their lie sound reasonable even when everyone knows it's falling apart? "The only family emergency," I said clearly, making sure every guest could hear me, "was discovering that my mother-in-law uninvited me from my own anniversary party because she thought I wasn't sophisticated enough for my own property." A collective gasp went through the crowd. This wasn't just drama anymore. This was a public reckoning. Camden finally found his voice. "Brielle, what are you talking about? You own this place." I turned to face my husband, the man who'd lived with me for 3 years without ever asking how I could afford our lifestyle, our house, our expensive vacations. "I own this vineyard, Camden. I bought it with money from selling my company for $80 million. I was planning to surprise you here for our anniversary until your mother decided I wasn't worthy of attending." Do you know what it looks like when a man realizes his entire understanding of his life is wrong? When everything he thought he knew about his wife crumbles in front of 67 witnesses. "80 million, he whispered. "Valley Connect. The little hobby your family spent 3 years dismissing? Microsoft bought it 2 years ago. I've been quietly building an empire while you all treated me like charity case." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word like they were watching the most expensive drama ever performed. Constance tried one more desperate play for control. "Well," she said, lifting her chin with practiced arrogance, "I suppose we should congratulate you on your business success. Though I do think there are more appropriate ways to share family news than public confrontations." I laughed. Actually laughed, right there, in front of everyone. Appropriate ways? Like the appropriate way you told 67 people that I was too unsophisticated to attend my own anniversary party? Like the appropriate way you lied to my husband about why I wouldn't be here? Her mask was slipping now. The perfect composure she'd maintained for decades was cracking under the weight of her own cruelty being exposed. "I was trying to protect you," she said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her. "Protect me from what, Constance? From my own property? From my own marriage? From people finding out that the woman you've spent 3 years dismissing is worth more than most of them combined?" Have you ever seen someone's entire social strategy collapse in real time? Watch someone realize that their power was built on lies that just got exposed. Maya stepped forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Brielle, I had no idea. I swear, if I had known what Mother was planning. Your mother told Harrison that I wouldn't appreciate an event of this caliber, I said, addressing the entire crowd now. She said my presence would make other guests uncomfortable. She said I needed to be protected from situations I wasn't equipped to handle. The whispers started again, but different now. Shocked, embarrassed whispers from people who were realizing they'd been part of something cruel. I spent 3 years trying to prove I was good enough for this family. I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word. I changed everything about myself. My clothes, my hobbies, my dreams. I made myself smaller and quieter and more acceptable. And it was never enough. Camden was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Like the woman he married had been replaced by a stranger. So tonight, standing in my own vineyard, wearing a dress that costs more than some people make in a year, talking to people who think their bank accounts make them better than everyone else, I want to ask you all a question. I looked around the terrace, making eye contact with as many guests as possible. What makes someone worthy of respect? Money? Status? The right last name? Or maybe it's treating people with basic human dignity, regardless of what you think they can do for you. The silence was deafening now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Constance opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't finished. I could humiliate you the way you humiliated me. I could tell everyone here exactly what you wrote about me in those emails. I could throw you off my property and let you explain to all your friends why your sophisticated evening ended with you being escorted out by security. Her face went completely white. But I'm not going to do that. What I said next would determine what kind of woman I really was. Instead, I continued, watching Constance's face cycle through relief and confusion. I'm going to do something your family never taught me. I'm going to show you grace. The crowd seemed to lean forward collectively, not sure what was coming next. Have you ever had the power to destroy someone and chosen mercy instead? Have you ever discovered what kind of person you really are when you hold someone else's dignity in your hands? Every single person here is welcome to stay. Enjoy the wine. It's from grapes I've been nurturing for 2 years. Enjoy the food. I chose every item on the menu. Enjoy the music, the lights, the view of hills that I wake up to every morning from my bedroom window in the main house. Several guests looked toward the mansion in the distance, finally understanding the scope of what they were looking at. But while you're enjoying my hospitality, I want you to remember something. The woman you've been dismissing, the woman who wasn't sophisticated enough to attend her own anniversary party, created all of this. Every beautiful detail you're admiring tonight exists because I had the vision to see what this place could become. I turned back to Constance, who was still frozen in place like a statue of her own shock. And Constance, when you go home tonight and tell your friends about this evening, I want you to remember that I could have destroyed you in front of everyone you respect. I could have read your emails out loud and let these people see exactly how small and cruel you really are. Do you know what power sounds like when it's wielded with mercy instead of vengeance? When someone shows you who they really are by how they treat you at your lowest moment. But instead, I'm going to let you keep your dignity. Not because you deserve it, but because that's who I choose to be. The silence stretched until Maya started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster, then with real enthusiasm. One by one, other guests joined her until the entire terrace was applauding. Not for Constance.
For me.
Camden stepped forward, his face full of an emotion I couldn't quite read. Brielle, don't, I said quietly, holding up my hand. Not here.
Not now.
He nodded, understanding that this wasn't the moment for private conversations. An older man I recognized as one of Camden's father's business partners approached me with obvious respect. Mrs. Matthews, I owe you an apology. We all do. I've known your husband's family for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone handle a situation with more class. Other guests began approaching, offering similar apologies and congratulations. People who'd looked through me for 3 years suddenly wanted to shake my hand and hear about my business success. Have you ever experienced the surreal moment when people who ignored you suddenly find you fascinating? When your worth changes in their eyes not because you changed, but because they finally saw who you'd always been. But the person I was watching was Constance. She stood in the center of it all like the eye of a hurricane, watching her social world rearrange itself around me instead of her. Her carefully constructed hierarchy had just collapsed. The woman she'd placed at the bottom had revealed herself to be at the top, and everyone could see it. Maya approached me with tears in her eyes. "Brielle, I am so sorry. I knew Mother could be difficult, but I had no idea she'd done this. The emails, the lies to Camden, it's unforgivable. People make mistakes when they're scared," I said gently. "Your mother was scared of losing control of her family's image. But fear doesn't excuse cruelty." As the evening continued, I watched the social dynamics play out like a fascinating experiment. People who'd barely acknowledged me for 3 years suddenly found reasons to mention business opportunities, charity work, social events I might enjoy. But through it all, 2 people remained silent. Constance, who was still processing the complete destruction of her worldview, and Camden, who was staring at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle he'd never noticed before. The question that hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone, was simple. What happens now? I owned this vineyard, this moment, this revelation. But what would I do with the power I'd just claimed? More importantly, what would happen when the guests went home, and I was left alone with the wreckage of my marriage and the mother-in-law who'd tried to erase me from my own life? As the party continued around us, I realized that winning this battle might have cost me everything else that mattered. 2 hours later, the terrace was still full of people who suddenly found me fascinating. Business cards appeared in my hand like magic tricks. Invitations to charity galas, gallery openings, and exclusive dinner parties materialized from people who'd spent 3 years pretending I didn't exist. But all I could think about was the look on Camden's face when he realized his wife was a stranger. Have you ever won a battle so completely that you weren't sure you wanted the victory? Ever discovered that getting everything you thought you wanted felt nothing like you'd imagined? "Mrs. Matthews," said a woman I recognized from Constance's charity committee, "I had no idea you were in tech. My daughter is starting a startup. Perhaps you could give her some advice." The same daughter whose private school graduation I wasn't invited to because Constance thought I'd be out of place. "I'd be happy to help," I said, because being gracious was easier than being honest about the irony. Around 9 p.m., I noticed Constance sitting alone at a corner table, staring into her wine glass like it held answers to questions she'd never thought to ask. For the first time in 3 years, she looked her age, vulnerable and confused instead of imperiously confident. Maya approached me as I watched her mother's isolation. "She's never been wrong before," she said quietly. "Not in her own mind, anyway. I think she's trying to figure out how this happened." How it happened. How the person she dismissed turned out to be the most successful person at the party. Do you know what it's like to see your enemy become human? To realize that the person who hurt you is just another flawed person trying to protect their place in the world? "Your mother wasn't wrong about everything," I said, surprising myself. "She was right that I didn't fit into your family's world. I just didn't realize that was a good thing." Maya looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "You could have humiliated her completely tonight."
Why didn't you?
I thought about that question as I watched Constance sitting alone, probably for the first time at a social event in decades. Because humiliating her wouldn't have made me feel better. It would have just made me like her. As the evening wound down, guests began leaving with promises to stay in touch and invitations to events I'd never been welcome at before. The social circle that had excluded me was now desperate to include me, but their sudden interest felt hollow. Success, I realized, was a language everyone spoke fluently. But character was something most people only recognized in retrospect. By 10 p.m., only family remained on the terrace. Camden's uncle and aunt made awkward small talk before excusing themselves. Maya hugged me goodbye with genuine warmth and a whispered promise to call soon. That left me alone with Camden and Constance under the string lights I'd chosen for my romantic surprise. Have you ever found yourself exactly where you thought you wanted to be, only to realize you no longer knew why you'd wanted to be there? Camden finally spoke, his voice careful and quiet. "Brielle, we need to talk." "Yes, we do." I had no idea about your company, about the money, about any of it. Why didn't you tell me? The question I'd been dreading. Because the honest answer was more complicated than he wanted to hear. I tried, Camden. Remember when I got my first big client and wanted to celebrate? You said it was cute that I was so excited about my little project. Remember when I mentioned that things were going well with the business? Your mother asked if I was finally ready to get a real job. He flinched at the memory. Every time I shared good news, your family found ways to diminish it. So I stopped sharing. But $80 million, Brielle. A vineyard. This isn't just good news. This is life-changing money. I know exactly what it is. I also know that 3 hours ago you agreed with your mother that I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend my own anniversary party. The accusation hung between us like a challenge he couldn't meet. Constance finally looked up from her wine glass. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Yes, you do. I was protecting what I thought mattered. Our family's reputation, our traditions, our standards. Your standards, I corrected. Not mine. She nodded slowly, like she was finally beginning to understand the difference. I convinced myself that you weren't right for Camden because you didn't come from our world. I thought that mattered more than who you actually are. Do you know what an apology sounds like when it costs someone everything they thought they knew about themselves? When they have to admit that their entire worldview was built on sand. The question is, I said, looking between my husband and his mother, what happens now? Because standing in my own vineyard, surrounded by the ruins of my old life and the uncertain foundation of whatever came next, I realized I had a choice to make. I could forgive them and try to rebuild something real from the honesty this night had forced into the open. Or I could walk away from people who'd only learned to value me after discovering my bank account. The decision would determine not just my future, but the kind of person I'd become after everything I'd been through. But first, I needed to know if the man I'd married was capable of seeing me as more than just a surprise he'd never bothered to unwrap. I need both of you to understand something, I said, my voice cutting through the night air like a blade. This isn't about money. This was never about money. Camden and Constance stared at me, still processing the wreckage of everything they thought they knew. This is about respect. This is about basic human decency. This is about the fact that for 3 years, you've treated me like I was lucky to be included in your family instead of recognizing that you were lucky to have me. Have you ever reached the moment where you stop asking for respect and start demanding it? Where you realize that your worth isn't up for debate anymore? Constance, you spent tonight celebrating family values while lying to my husband about why his wife wasn't here. You toasted to his success while publicly dismissing mine. You talked about tradition and standards while showing the worst possible character. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't look away. And Camden, I turned to face my husband. You let it happen. You've been letting it happen for 3 years. Every snide comment, every exclusion, every time she made me feel small, you chose your comfort over my dignity. That's not fair, he started, but I cut him off. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I built a company while working at a coffee shop. I sold it for $80 million while you assumed I was barely getting by. I bought us this incredible property to surprise you, and instead I got to watch you celebrate our marriage without me because your mother convinced you I wasn't good enough to attend. The words tumbled out faster now, 3 years of swallowed pride and hidden hurt finally finding their voice. Do you know what I did every time your family made me feel worthless? I worked harder. Every insult, every dismissal, every time they made it clear I didn't belong, I channeled that pain into building something extraordinary. Do you know what it feels like to realize that your pain became your power? That the people who tried to break you accidentally made you stronger? While your mother was planning ways to exclude me from family events, I was creating jobs for 200 people. While she was teaching you to be ashamed of your wife, I was building something that would outlast all of us. Camden's face was pale in the string lights. Brielle, you never meant to hurt me. You never meant to let your mother treat me like garbage. You never meant to agree that your wife wasn't sophisticated enough for your anniversary party. But meaning doesn't matter. Actions matter. I looked around the terrace at the remnants of the party. Empty champagne glasses, scattered napkins, the detritus of a celebration that was supposed to honor our marriage. I created all of this beauty for you, Camden. Every vine, every light, every perfect detail was meant to be a gift for the man I loved. Instead, it became the stage for your family to explain why I wasn't worthy of your love. The silence stretched between us like a chasm that might never be crossed. Constance finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was wrong. 2 words that must have cost her everything she thought she was. Yes, you were wrong. But being wrong isn't the worst thing you did. The worst thing you did was convince my husband that you were right. I turned back to Camden, studying his face in the dim light. So, here's my question for you. Now that you know who I really am, now that you know what I'm really worth, do you love me more? Or do you just respect me more? What's the difference? Everything. If you love me more because I'm rich, then you never loved me at all. You love the idea of me, the version of me that fit your family's standards. But if you respect me more because you finally see my strength, my intelligence, my capability, then maybe we have something to build on. Have you ever asked someone to choose between loving you for what you have or loving you for who you are? Ever made someone look at the difference between their feelings and their respect? I don't know how to answer that, Camden said honestly. Then we have our answer. I walked to the edge of the terrace and looked out over the vineyard that was supposed to be our fresh start. Instead, it had become the place where our marriage died of honesty. I'm going to stay here tonight, I said without turning around. This is my home now, whether we're married or not. You can go back to the house we shared, or you can stay at your mother's, or you can figure out whatever comes next. But I'm done pretending to be smaller than I am to make other people comfortable. What about us? Camden asked. I turned back to face him one final time. That depends on who you decide to be tomorrow. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my Vineyard office when Maya knocked on the door. She looked nervous but determined, carrying a coffee tray and what appeared to be a very expensive apology gift. I brought peace offerings, she said, holding up the pastries from the bakery where Camden and I had our first date. And I brought something else. Have you ever had someone show up to clean up their family's mess? Someone brave enough to face the consequences of other people's mistakes. Maya, you don't need to apologize for your mother's behavior. Actually, I do. Because I enabled it. She set down the coffee and met my eyes directly. I knew she was being cruel to you. I knew she was excluding you from family events. And I told myself it wasn't my business, that she'd come around eventually. I gestured for her to sit down in the chair across from my desk, the desk in the office of the Vineyard her family had tried to exclude me from. I should have stood up for you years ago. I should have told Camden what was happening when he wasn't around. I should have called Mother out on her behavior instead of making excuses for it. Why didn't you? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it might hold answers. Because it was easier. Because standing up to Mother meant risking her disapproval, and I'm ashamed to admit that I chose the easy path over the right one. Do you know what courage sounds like when it comes 3 years too late? When someone finally finds their backbone after watching you get yours broken. Maya, I appreciate this. I really do. But apologizing now doesn't change what happened. I know. But I'm not just here to apologize. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I'm here to tell you something about Camden that you need to know. My stomach twisted. After 3 weeks of silence from my husband, I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever revelation she was carrying. He's been staying with me, not Mother. And Brielle, he's falling apart. Falling apart how? He hasn't been to work in a week. He sits in my guest room staring at his phone like he's trying to figure out how to call you. He's been going through all your old business articles online, trying to understand the company you built while he wasn't paying attention. Have you ever heard about someone discovering who you really are after you've already decided to stop caring whether they notice? Yesterday, I found him crying while reading the Forbes interview you did last year. The one where you talked about building Valley Connect while working multiple jobs to pay for your startup costs. I remembered that interview. The journalist had asked about my inspiration, and I talked about wanting to create something that would help small businesses like the coffee shop where I'd worked. I'd never told Camden about the article. He said he realized that every time he came into that coffee shop, you were building an empire during your breaks. Every time you worked late, every time you seemed distracted, every time you were too tired to attend his family's events, you were creating something extraordinary. And now he feels guilty. No, Maya said, surprising me. Now he feels stupid. There's a difference. She opened the envelope and pulled out a handwritten letter. He asked me to give this to you. He said he didn't deserve to deliver it himself. I stared at the letter without touching it. What does it say? I don't know, but I can tell you what he told me when he wrote it. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He said he'd spent 3 years married to a remarkable woman and never bothered to really see her. He said he'd been so worried about whether you fit into his family that he never stopped to wonder whether his family deserved to have you in it. The words hit harder than I'd expected. After 3 weeks of silence, hearing that Camden was finally asking the right questions felt like a victory I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. Is he different now? Really different? Or just sorry he got caught? Maya considered this carefully. I think he's horrified. Not just by Mother's behavior, but by his own. He keeps saying he can't believe he let his wife feel unwelcome in her own marriage. Do you know what it's like to hear that someone finally understands what they put you through, but wonder if it's too little too late? Maya, I need you to understand something. Even if Camden has changed, even if he's genuinely sorry, that doesn't automatically fix what's broken between us. I know. Trust isn't something you can just apologize back into existence. Respect isn't something you can promise to do better at. These things take time to rebuild, if they can be rebuilt at all. She nodded, understanding more than I'd expected. But you should also know, she continued, Mother's been different too. That surprised me. Different how? Quiet, thoughtful. She canceled all her charity committee meetings this month. She's been reading business journals and asking questions about your industry. It's like she's trying to educate herself about the world she dismissed. I wasn't sure how to process that information. Constance learning about technology felt like such an alien concept I couldn't picture it. She also asked me to tell you something. What? She said she's never been more wrong about anything in her life. And she said she understands if you never forgive her, but she hopes someday you'll let her try to earn your forgiveness. Have you ever had your worst enemy become human at the exact moment when you'd finally stopped caring about their opinion? I picked up Camden's letter, feeling its weight in my hands. Maya, can I ask you something? What would you do if you were me? She smiled sadly. I honestly don't know, but I know what I hope you'll do. Which is, give him a chance to prove he's learned who you really are. That evening, I finally opened Camden's letter. I poured myself a glass of wine from my own vineyard and sat on the terrace where everything had fallen apart 3 weeks ago. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten in his careful script, and it started with words I'd never expected to read from my husband. Brielle, I don't know the woman I married, and that's entirely my fault. Have you ever had someone admit to a truth that changes everything about your relationship? Someone who finally sees what was right in front of them the whole time? I spent our entire marriage seeing you as someone who needed to be improved, guided, helped to fit into my world. I never stopped to consider that your world might be bigger and better than mine. I set down the wine and kept reading. I've been reading everything I can find about Valley Connect, about you, about the empire you built while I was worried about whether you knew which fork to use at dinner parties. Do you know what I realized? While I was working a job, my father got me at a company he partially owns. You were creating something from nothing. While I was coasting on family connections, you were earning every success through intelligence and hard work. The next paragraph made my hands shake. I realize now that every time you tried to share your accomplishments with me, I diminished them because they made me uncomfortable. Not because they weren't impressive, but because they were more impressive than anything I'd ever done. I was intimidated by your success, so I convinced myself it didn't matter. Do you know what it feels like to read someone finally taking responsibility for years of small cruelties? When they stop making excuses and start telling the truth. The night at the Vineyard, when Mother gave that speech about family values and standards, I should have stopped her. I should have said, "The woman you're describing isn't my wife. My wife is brilliant and driven and accomplished, and we're lucky she chose to join our family." I had to stop reading for a moment. Those were words I'd dreamed of hearing for 3 years. Instead, I stood there and let her publicly humiliate the woman I promised to honor and protect. I let my mother lie to me about why you weren't there, and I accepted that lie because it was easier than confronting the truth about how we'd been treating you. The letter continued for 2 more pages, detailing specific moments where he'd failed me, specific times when he'd chosen his family's comfort over my dignity. He didn't make excuses or ask for immediate forgiveness. He just laid out the truth in painful detail. But it was the ending that broke me. I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I know that understanding what I did wrong doesn't undo the damage. I know that you have every right to walk away from this marriage and never look back. But if there's any part of you that still believes in the man I could become, I'm asking for a chance to earn back what I threw away. Not the woman I thought I married, but the extraordinary woman you've always been. I folded the letter and sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of my vineyard coming alive for the night. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Constance. I know I don't have the right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I've enrolled in a business course at the community college. I'm trying to understand the world I dismissed. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to earn the right to ask for it someday." Have you ever had 2 people who hurt you both trying to become better at the same time? When the people who made you feel worthless finally start to understand your worth. 20 minutes later, another text appeared. This one from Camden. "I know Maya delivered my letter. I'm not asking for an answer, and I'm not asking you to see me. I just want you to know that I'm in therapy, learning how to be the husband you deserved from the beginning. Whatever you decide about us, I'm going to become a better man because of who you showed me I could be." I sat on my terrace until midnight, thinking about forgiveness and second chances, and the difference between people who are sorry they got caught and people who are genuinely trying to change. The truth was, I miss my husband. Not the man who'd stood by while his mother humiliated me, but the man who'd fallen in love with my dreams in a coffee shop 3 years ago. The question was, could people really change? Could Camden become the partner I needed him to be all along? And more importantly, was I brave enough to find out? I picked up my phone and typed a message I'd been composing in my head for 3 weeks. "Camden, meet me at the coffee shop where we met. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. We need to talk." The coffee shop looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago, but everything else had changed. I arrived early and chose the corner table where Camden had proposed, wondering if he'd remember the significance. He walked through the door at exactly 10 a.m., looking like he'd lost weight and sleep in equal measure. When he saw me, relief and terror crossed his face in rapid succession. Have you ever sat down to a conversation that could either save your marriage or end it for good? When every word carries the weight of your entire future? "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either." We ordered our drinks, the same ones we'd always gotten, a small ritual that felt both comforting and heartbreaking. When the barista walked away, Camden looked directly into my eyes. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too proud and too stupid to see what I had. Camden, please let me say this. I've been practicing for 3 weeks." He took a shaky breath. "I failed you as a husband. I failed you as a partner. I failed you as a man who promised to love and protect you, and instead let his family treat you like you were disposable. Do you know what accountability sounds like when someone finally stops making excuses? When they own their mistakes without trying to minimize them? I spent our entire marriage trying to change you instead of defending you. I was embarrassed by things that should have made me proud. Your work ethic, your independence, your refusal to be impressed by inherited wealth. Those weren't flaws. They were the best parts of who you are." The coffee shop hummed with quiet conversation around us, but our corner felt isolated from the world. "I want to ask you something," I said. "If I hadn't turned out to be rich, If I was still just the coffee shop girl with big dreams, would you be here right now? He was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. I want to say yes. I want to believe I would have eventually realized how wrong I was. But honestly, I don't know. And that terrifies me. Have you ever respected someone more for admitting they don't know than you would have if they'd given you the answer you wanted to hear? The truth is, finding out about your success forced me to see things I should have noticed years ago. Your intelligence, your drive, your incredible capacity to build something meaningful from nothing. I should have seen those things because I loved you, not because you became successful enough that I couldn't ignore them anymore. So, what's different now? Now I know that I married up, not down. Now I know that you didn't need my family's approval, we needed yours. Now I know that the woman I fell in love with in this coffee shop was extraordinary, and I spent 3 years trying to make her ordinary. I sipped my coffee and studied his face, looking for signs of the old Camden, the one who'd made excuses for his mother's cruelty, who'd chosen his comfort over my dignity. Camden, I need you to understand something. Even if I forgive you, even if we try to rebuild this marriage, things can never go back to how they were. I know. I'm not going to try to fit into your family's world anymore. I'm not going to make myself smaller to make them comfortable. I'm not going to pretend your mother's behavior was acceptable just to keep peace. I wouldn't want you to. And I'm not going to hide my success or downplay my accomplishments to protect your ego. If you can't handle being married to someone who might be more successful than you are, then this conversation ends right here. Do you know what it's like to set boundaries after years of having none? To finally state your terms instead of accepting whatever treatment someone offers? Brielle, I want to be married to exactly who you are. The successful entrepreneur, the vineyard owner, the woman who chose grace over revenge when she had every right to destroy my family. I want to be worthy of you, not the other way around. That's going to require more than words. I know. That's why I've been in therapy twice a week. That's why I've been reading everything about your industry, your company, your accomplishments. That's why I'm learning how to be the kind of man who lifts up his wife instead of holding her back. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of 3 weeks of loneliness and 3 years of disappointment. Camden, I'm scared. Of what? Of believing you can change. Of giving you my heart again just to have you break it the same way. Of trusting that this time will be different. He reached across the table and gently touched my hand. I'm scared too. I'm scared I'm too late. I'm scared I've done too much damage. I'm scared I'll never be good enough for the woman I finally understand I married. Have you ever reached the moment where fear becomes less important than hope? Where the risk of trying again feels smaller than the certainty of giving up? I don't know if we can fix this, I said honestly. Neither do I.
But I know I want to try.
And I know I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become the husband you deserved from day one. I looked around the coffee shop where our love story had begun, where I'd been brave enough to dream of building a life with this man. Maybe it was time to be brave enough to dream of rebuilding it. Okay, I said finally. We can try. The relief on his face was so profound it almost broke my heart all over again. But Camden, this isn't getting back together. This is starting over. With new rules, new boundaries, and the understanding that I won't tolerate being disrespected by you or your family ever again. I understand. We're going to need couples therapy. Real therapy, not just conversations about how to fix things. Already scheduled. And your mother is not allowed to interfere in our marriage ever again. I should have established that boundary 3 years ago. Do you know what it sounds like when someone finally prioritizes your relationship over their family's dysfunction? When they choose you first for the first time. We sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours, talking about what a second chance might look like, what we'd need to rebuild, what we'd have to leave behind. It wasn't going to be easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal quickly or completely. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was talking to a partner instead of someone I had to convince to value me. When we finally left, Camden walked me to my car. Brielle, can I ask you something? What? That night at the Vineyard, why did you choose grace instead of revenge? You could have destroyed us all. I thought about that question, about the moment when I'd held their dignity in my hands and chosen to give it back. Because the woman I want to be doesn't win by making other people lose. She wins by being so authentically herself that everyone around her has to rise to meet her level. He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. That's why I fell in love with you in this coffee shop 3 years ago. And that's why I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. 1 year later, I'm standing on the terrace of my vineyard, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and purple. The same terrace where my marriage almost ended, where I discovered who I really was when I stopped pretending to be someone else. Tonight, we're hosting our annual charity fundraiser for women entrepreneurs. 200 guests, including business leaders, startup founders, and young women with dreams as big as mine used to be. Have you ever turned your greatest pain into your greatest purpose? Transformed the place where you were broken into a place where others find strength? The event isn't about revenge or proving anything anymore. It's about using my resources and my story to lift up other women who might be hiding their light to make other people comfortable. Camden approaches me, carrying 2 glasses of wine from our vineyard. He's been my true partner for 8 months now, not perfect but present. Not just supportive, but actively proud of what I've built. The speaker wants to know if you're ready, he says, handing me my wine. Almost. He kisses my cheek and squeezes my hand. I'm proud of you. Not because of your success, but because of your heart. Do you know what it feels like when someone finally sees your character instead of just your achievements? When they love you for your soul, not your net worth. I look out over the crowd gathering on my terrace. I see Maya talking enthusiastically with a group of young entrepreneurs. I see Harrison directing the catering staff with the precision that's made our events legendary. And in the back, sitting quietly at a corner table, I see Constance. She's been coming to these fundraisers for 6 months now, not as a donor seeking social credit, but as someone genuinely trying to understand the world she once dismissed. She completed her business course and now volunteers with a nonprofit that helps women start their own companies. Last month, she approached me after one of these events. "Brielle," she said, her voice careful and humble, "I know I can't undo the damage I did. But I want you to know that you've taught me something I should have learned decades ago." "What's that?" "That a person's worth isn't measured by how well they fit into existing systems. It's measured by their courage to create new ones." Have you ever watched someone completely transform who they are because you refuse to let them diminish who you are? When your strength becomes the catalyst for someone else's growth. Tonight, she's here not because she has to be, but because she wants to support women like the one she spent years trying to tear down. I walk to the microphone as the crowd settles into quiet attention. 3 years ago, I begin, my voice carrying clearly across the terrace. I was working at a coffee shop, building a dream that most people couldn't see. I was told I wasn't sophisticated enough for certain spaces, wasn't accomplished enough for certain conversations, wasn't worthy enough for certain opportunities. The crowd is completely silent now, hanging on every word. I spent years trying to make myself smaller, so other people would be comfortable with my presence. I dimmed my light, so I wouldn't outshine anyone else. I apologized for my ambitions and hid my accomplishments because I thought that's what it meant to be humble. Do you know what truth sounds like when it's spoken without shame? When you finally tell your story from a place of strength instead of defensiveness. But here's what I learned. The world doesn't need you to be smaller. It needs you to be exactly as brilliant, as ambitious, as extraordinary as you were created to be. The right people will celebrate your light, not ask you to dim it. I scan the crowd, seeing faces of women who understand exactly what I'm talking about. Every woman here tonight has been told at some point that she's too much of something. Too ambitious, too smart, too successful, too independent. But look around this terrace. Look at what happens when women who are too much come together to support each other. The applause starts softly and builds to something thunderous. This vineyard exists because I stopped asking for permission to dream big. These businesses you're funding tonight will exist because you're giving other women permission to do the same. I pause, looking directly at Constance, who has tears in her eyes. And sometimes, When we're brave enough to be authentically ourselves, we give other people permission to grow beyond who they thought they had to be. We show them that change is possible, that grace is stronger than grudges, that transformation can happen at any age. The crowd rises to its feet, applauding not just my words, but the truth they represent. Have you ever realized that your story isn't just about what you overcame, but about what you made possible for others? That your pain had a purpose you couldn't see when you were in the middle of it? After the speeches, after the donations are counted, after the last guest says goodbye, I stand alone on my terrace one more time. Camden finds me there, just like he did a year ago, but everything is different now. "What are you thinking about?" he asks, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am." "For what?" I lean back against his chest and look out over the vineyard that saved my marriage by almost ending it. For every person who told me I wasn't enough. For every door that closed in my face. For every moment when I had to choose between being accepted and being authentic. Why grateful for those things? Because they led me here. To this moment, this place, this version of myself that I never would have discovered if everyone had just been kind to me from the beginning. Do you know what peace feels like when you finally understand that your struggles weren't punishments but preparations? When you realize that everything you survived was making you into exactly who you needed to become. Sometimes the greatest gift people can give you is forcing you to find out who you really are when you stop trying to be who they want you to be. Camden tightens his arms around me. I love who you are when you're not trying to be anyone else. I love who we are when we're brave enough to be real. As we stand there in the place where my old life died and my real life began, I think about all the women who will benefit from tonight's fundraiser. All the dreams that will become realities because someone believed in them. And I think about the girl I used to be, working at a coffee shop with impossible dreams and unshakable determination. I wish I could go back and tell her what I know now, that the people who don't see your worth aren't the ones whose opinion matters. That you don't have to earn the right to take up space in this world. That your value isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it. But mostly, I'd tell her to hold on. Because everything that feels like an ending is actually just a beginning you haven't seen yet. The vineyard settles into quiet around us, ready for tomorrow's harvest, ready for whatever comes next.
And so am I.